Hey everybody, Theresa here of Larkin Design. Today I am up on the Citrus Twist blog with our April 3 to Inspire. And so my task today is to provide you a recipe with 3 ingredients to inspire you to create a layout today. And so I'm going to create this mixed media layout. It's a 12 by 12 layout. And I am working on watercolor paper. And my first task is that I'm going to create a mixed media background here. And I'm using one of the patterned papers in the April Make It a Venti kit to inspire this background. And so you can see a little tiny bit of the paper that I'm using to inspire this background, and it's the little bluish purple floral with pink flowers on it, and you can see just a corner of it. And so I'm inspired by the colors in that pattern paper. And what I'm doing first is I'm using Canson watercolor paper, which is a little bit more cream than I normally like on my layouts. So I added a layer of gesso. And I used a really rough tool. Well, it's not really rough. It's a basic spackling tool that I got from Lowe's, but it leaves grooves in the gesso and it leaves a kind of rough border. And what happens then is when I do the spray, it will react with that gesso, and you'll see how I do this pretty interesting texture here. I'm using India inks. I will link the colors down below. And notice how I'm not using brushes. I dropped the color onto the watercolor paper and am turning the paper. I spray water and then turn the paper to tell the ink where I want it to go. And then I'm going to use these paper towels. And the interesting thing that happens when you spray gesso is that it sort of reactivates it. And then when you press the paper towel onto the wet ink and the wet gesso, you'll be left with a little bit of the texture from the paper towel. I could just sit here and do this all day long. It's so therapeutic just to watch the ink run across the page. Tell it where you want it to go. If you do this technique, turn the paper to make it go where you want to go. Add more water if it's condensed in an area, and just let it flow across the paper. When you're starting a new layer, make sure that you set it really well with your heat gun. And then here again, I'm going to grab a paper towel and lay that down and get a little of that ink up. Now, full disclosure, when you spray the water on the India inks, it will spray onto your worktop. If you don't want to damage your worktop, you might want to put down some butcher paper or something like that. Give yourself a little bit of space for the ink splatters. I usually repaint my desk every couple of weeks, and so that's what I did after I finished this layout. Just full disclosure. And I slowed the video down a little bit. There you could see the pattern paper that was the inspiration, and then the mixed media background that came from that inspiration. So that's your first item for inspiration, is to use a pattern paper for your mixed media background. And once I have that all dry and everything is set, it feels pretty good to the touch now. I'm ready to add all the beautiful layers and my photos and the things that I want to add to make this layout complete. So I have a photo here. It's a pretty square photo, and I've decided for my design concept for this layout, I want a couple of journaling cards and the photo going across the layout in a horizontal, just in a horizontal line, sort of a little bit below the center. And then I want to use the floral cut file that's included in the subscriber members area on the website, this beautiful floral cut file. And so that's our second item to inspire, is to cut a cut file. I've cut this one in 2 different ways, and I'll show you that. I cut it from this green pattern paper, and I also cut it from one of the turquoise and green pattern papers as well. At first I thought I was going to use those patterns. As I'm seeing it here against the background, here's the other cut that I made. As I see it against the background, I'm realizing that it really doesn't pop the way I want it to. So, of course, you probably know that I ended up using the flip side of the patterned papers instead, and that's okay. Use your cut files in a different way than you originally planned to, if that's how it happens to be. I also am cutting this floral away from the frame. It's intended to be used with a frame, and I just simply wanted the florals here, and I want them to come out from the top and the bottom of the journaling cards and the photo here. And so here's where I made the executive decision to flip it over and use the white, just so that it would contrast against your background. And this is one of my best layering techniques, is to use contrast. And so if you have a very colorful background, use white or black and white to contrast against that. I'm going to use white cut files here to contrast against the mixed media background. And then you'll see the third item to inspire in just a few minutes, and that will be the black element to pop against that background. So at this point, my basic design concept for the layout is pretty well laid out here. I have a great horizontal movement across the page. So I've plugged in my glue gun. I'm ready to adhere things down. I use the journaling cards to adhere the cut file down, and then I'll add a little bit of glue underneath some of those flowers as well. Excuse me, just to make sure that it's adhered really well. And I've given myself some journaling space on these journaling cards as well. You can see I used a floral one on the right hand side of the layout, and then in the center next to my photo is another blank one that has space for the date, and then room for my journaling as well. I really liked that Subway art card, so I've cut that up and used that in a couple of different places as well. So the third item for the 3 to inspire is to use a stamp set and use black ink to contrast against your mixed media background. And so I was really inspired by the Traveler's Notebook stamp set this month. It's filled with empowering and affirming word art. Some of the word art that I've used are Hey You, Don't Quit, Find Your Fire, It's On, Time to Make the Magic Happen, Dreamer. Those are some of the really awesome word sentiments that are in that stamp set. And so this is a technique that I use over and over and over again. Make a mixed media background and then stamp your sentiments around your layout in black ink around the layout just for contrast and to repeat the messages that you want to say on your layout. And so notice how most of the stamps that I added to this layout follow that horizontal pattern above and below the journaling cards and the photos. And these become the background, and the stamped sentiments now become home bases for my embellishment clusters. So this is a great way to start an embellishment cluster, to tie your stamping in with your embellishments on your layout so that they feel like they're part of the layout itself. And so again, with the embellishments that I'm using, I'm following this very horizontal line on the layout above and below the photo and the journaling card. So I'll tell you a little bit about why I made this layout. I have an album that I call the Things I Need to Hear album, or the Things I Need to Hear project. And so I like to remind myself sometimes of what are the things that my mom might say to me. She died about 11 years ago, and I miss her every day. And when I'm feeling down or when I need a pick-me-up, I like to think about the things that she would say to me right now if I were to be able to call her on the phone. And so the stamp set, the Traveler's Notebook stamp set, really reminded me of some of the things that I think that she would say to me. And I've pulled this layout together just to remind myself of some really good things right now that I'm doing, and to keep going, to not stop even when it gets hard, to keep going, and that we're all doing really amazing things. So let's stay at it. I hope that you are inspired today, that I've given you some things to help you in your creative process today, and that you've enjoyed watching this layout come together. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to check out the Citrus Twist blog through the link below, and I hope that you will like and comment on the video and subscribe to my channel. I'll see you back here again soon. Bye-bye.